Hello world and true believers. This is Brenda, a lost Aspie girl, and I wanted to make today's video about gender. And I want to be really careful with this one because I like when I brought up the whole thing of me dissecting the toads. I don't want to, or like my idea about putting girls on birth control after the menses. I know that some of my ideas are rather controversial, and I don't want to offend people. But a lot of people, we've been talking a lot about gender and the extreme male-minded theory of Simon Baron-Cohen when it comes to those of us on the spectrum. And this got me thinking to gender, but not just as it applies to us like spectrumites, but also as a whole, as females as a whole. Because I feel like when it comes to equality, we as females, we've progressed so far, but we haven't progressed any further. And I feel like we are our own worst enemy when it comes to this. I'm not saying that there aren't still obstacles that we need to overcome when it comes to dealing with men. I just don't feel like that is any longer our biggest obstacle. I feel like we are, and before you guys get up in arms, just hear me out a little bit, okay? So like one of the things, I feel like a lot of times women are like crabs in a pot. Like when one starts to pull herself out, it's not even whether or not she's pulling herself out. It's not often even whether she's pulling herself. Sometimes it's how she's pulling herself out of the pot. And other girls will see this and they'll get angry and they'll pull her back down. And what I mean by this is like there's a couple of different layers to this. One is that I think that like I was reading this book a couple of years ago when I was still working. I told you guys I had all those problems with that female boss that I had, and I didn't understand why she didn't like me, and I was trying to figure it out. And I bought this book, and it was called In the Company of Women, and it was about this female consultant of these companies, and she realized from the data that she collected and from her own observations, and then she continued as she was consulting with these companies. She was collecting data from them. She would have them take surveys and do various different things. And one of the things that she realized was that a lot of times women, the problems that they were having getting promoted and rising in companies wasn't it was actually more due to other females than it was to men. And I found this very intriguing. And her theory was, she calls it power dead even. That if girls see other women with more power than them, then they get angry and they get jealous and they become catty and they want retribution. Especially if it's someone like if they're working with a girl and she's a coworker and another girl gets promoted, or a female whatever woman gets promoted ahead of her, she'll get very angry and a lot of times treat her rather poorly, become catty, and there's a lot of drama. And it also works in reverse. A lot of times if a girl gets promoted, she will become kind of a bitch, and sometimes it's to protect herself. Sometimes she feels like to make it in a male world, she has to morph into this kind of mean version of herself. And she talks about it like the best way to avoid this is this whole power dead even strategy that she had, which was that if a woman has a perceived more power than somebody else, then the woman with more power has to basically give power back to the other woman, and to make it all even. And I was like, this is fucking bullshit, because like, let's look at men for a second. I think part of the reason why men are still the dominant gender is because their mindset is all's fair in love and war, right? It basically is like, I think, I'm not saying that you should hurt other people or whatever, but basically, as long as you're not hurting me or my own, then do whatever you need to do to get ahead. And not only will I applaud you for it, but I will follow you as a leader and admire you for that. I don't think women do that. They don't admire the uber woman the way men admire the uber man. You know what I mean? In fact, like, look at right now. Wonder Woman actually got kicked out of the UN as an icon for being too provocative. One of the few powers that we have in this world is being provocative, and she fucking got kicked out of the UN for that. And women do that all the time, in jobs. Like if a woman makes it ahead because she used her sexuality, other women will condemn her. Does that happen with men? If men, like, I'm not saying that, I'm not talking about sexual harassment or anything like that, but if a man is strong or sexy or whatever, and he's in the workplace and he gets promoted ahead of other women, you know, do other men condemn him for it? No. Do other women condemn him for it? Definitely not. You know, and she actually, the woman who writes this book, she actually talks about that. How a woman can be on par with a man at a job, and if he gets promoted, they think nothing of it. They have no problem with that at all. But if a woman does, they all of a sudden they try to start to pull her down. Right? That's kind of bullshit. And I also think that the thing that's like the power that men have that's tantamount to ours is the fact that, let's face it, ladies, men are 22% tall, like bigger than us on average. They have 25% more muscle mass on average. Okay, so they're bigger than us, but I don't think that means anything. Like when I was a little girl, my dad used to always say to me, "Our male-dominated society is a product of biology. Technology and education are the great equalizers. You can be anything you want, little girl. Don't let anybody tell you anything differently." That's what my father told me. My mom, on the other hand, would tell me that boys are better than girls and that my brother didn't need to do... Don't get me wrong, I love my mom, but she's very, very social, and she definitely feels that boys are better than girls. And she will tell anybody that. Yeah, at the same time, she gets, like, there's this whole weird double standard, and I feel like women are more the ones that kind of pull each other down. Like, even if you think about it, like... Let's talk about feminism for a second. For the most part, feminism says you're a feminist if you champion the woman cause, but only if you act like the way, according to what the feminists think that you should be. That means, you know, like basically emulate men. Like how is that? Like, isn't that a form of slavery? Saying you're tethered to these expectations, and unless you stay within the confines of what we say is okay, then we're not going to champion your cause. I don't think that that's okay. I think that it should be like, we should be more like men in this way, not in all ways. I don't think that we should try to be like men in a lot of ways, but in this way we should be like, it's about solidarity, it's about sisterhood, and whatever way a woman wants to climb, as long as she's not hurting anybody else when she's doing it, then celebrate that shit. You know what I mean? Because right now, like, women, I think, are worse to each other than men are. Like, women, like, if another girl, like, first, when it comes to identity, I talk about this to Neighsayer a couple of times on here about ego and the neurosocial ego, because I actually think that it's not even about the male-minded, the extreme male-minded theory for Simon Baron Cohen. I actually think it's the more female, the supposedly more female brain is actually the more social brain, because there are a lot of men out there that have very social brains, and if you think about it, they're a lot like females, except they use it in a different way. It manifests differently. They tend to be the players, the ones that are really good at manipulating, the con artists and things like that. They're very indirect, and nothing they say means what it says. But if you ask them to break down what they were doing, whether it be through giving someone sympathy or manipulation, I don't think they could break it down like using logistics, like logically, what it is that another person's perspective. However, they can intuitively sense that perspective and then use it to their advantage, and that's what like a lot of other girls do, you know what I mean? Like, do that intuitively. But I think also because of that, I think the more social brain that you have, the more likely you are to be judgmental and critical of other people. The more likely you are to, rather than the more you care about what other people are doing. Like I live in this building. There are a lot of old ladies that live in here, and they are the most nosy people ever. Like, I get a lot of packages, and they're so catty about it. Like, if I get a package, they'll get mad. First, I've gotten the front office that has called me many times that have told me I've left packages down there too long, and they get very upset about it. And the other thing is, if I go down there and they're all talking, they're just like, "You got another package? I just wonder." I'm like, "It's just a subscription to Amazon. I just get subscriptions. It's nothing exciting. Why do you care?" And it's crazy to me. And I think the more social someone's brain is, the more they care what other people are doing, the more their ego, and like this is what Neighsayer was saying, like how invasive it is, how it wants to invade other people's space and tell them what to do and how to act and how the appropriate way of acting is. And I say that's bullshit, because like I think that like if you just kept you like, well, if someone's not doing something that's hurting you or your own, why do you care what they're doing? Like, I think that's why it's taken so long for minorities to be seen as equals, for whether it be gender or race based, or also like when it comes to sexual orientation. Why do people care? But I think it goes back to the whole social mindset where like people that are on the spectrum are less susceptible to social manipulation, where other people are very much, and I think even though they don't always admit it to themselves, they're very much afraid that what other people are doing is somehow going to influence them. Like, I think like a lot of guys that are very like social, whatever, they're very, very afraid that other guys that are gay or whatever are going to, that somehow that's gonna rub off on them, and they're very afraid of it. You know what I mean? And that's crazy to me. Like, just be who you are. And I think that girls are more like that than anyone else. They're more likely to condemn other people for being different or for not doing things within the confines, and that's a slave mentality, saying you like, I celebrate your victories or whatever, but as long as you do it the way I tell you, you have to do it. As long as you are not sexy when you do it, as long as you maybe you neuter yourself, or maybe like or whatever it is that you think that the other person should be, and you care so much what the other person's doing. Why does that matter? That's the question, and I think that's what's kind of holding us back, because I think that it needs to be there should be no limitation. Girls should be like, I think, okay, I was reading this book from the 80s not that long ago, and part of the reason I read this, it was for this one line, because I remember reading it, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's about this alternative universe, and in the alternative universe, there's this girl, and then the men are in this alternative universe are much more dominant than they are here. And she's very intelligent, but she doesn't think she's going to make it. And she's riding with there's this group, like they're kind of like, like as they're apt to be in like these alternative universes, like a group of heroes that are going out to save the world or whatever. And she's with them, and she's like, I'm not gonna be able to do some. I'm a girl and I'm small and I'm blah 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 blah. And he's like, what are you talking about? He's like, why? He's like, look at horses, look at elephants and everything like that. Like, man controls these animals. Why? Because man is smarter than these animals. It's actually a man who wrote this book, and he's saying this to this girl in this book. Women are smarter than men. On the day women realize this, women will be superior to men. Now, like I always try to say whenever I talk about, like when I talk about spectrumites and compare it to neurosocials or neuroatypicals and compare it to neurotypicals, I always try to say not one is better than the other, but they're counterpoints to each other. And I'm saying the same thing about men and women. I'm not saying that women are better than men, although like I do think it's also interesting that Socrates said that when women become equal to man, woman will be his superior. And that obviously hasn't happened. And I think that one of the problems is, like I said, like women are holding each other back. I actually think that sometimes men are sit back and they laugh and they say, we don't need to worry about women superseding us or being superior to us. They're too busy squabbling amongst themselves and vying for our attention. Because I mean, look at women. Like what are one of the things that women do to each other all the time? Like if they're not in a relationship, like or whatever it is, like whatever is standard or expectation one woman has of the other woman, if the other woman doesn't adhere to it, they immediately begin to judge them and condemn them. And that is not the way. I think we need to stop worrying about what everybody else is doing and worry about ourselves. You know what I mean? And I think also another thing that women, I think we need to do is that when it comes to men, like, yeah, stop, first of all, vying for their attention. And I think a lot of times feminists will say, oh, we don't care what men think. But they do, because if they didn't care what men think, then they wouldn't feel that they needed a neuter to themselves to not have men control them. If you stop caring what people think of you at all, then they can't control you because you don't care what they think. When that perception of you doesn't matter, then they lose complete control of you. And I think that those of us on the spectrum, especially females on the spectrum, male on the spectrum, because they just don't give a shit at all. I think females on the spectrum, we're a little bit more susceptible to that. And I think the day that's the most freeing for all girls on the spectrum is the day that they realize that other people's opinions do not matter at all. That maybe we'll get in trouble for it, but fuck all of them. We're going to get in trouble anyways because we can't see what they see. And I think that when more females in general start to realize that other people's opinion don't matter, then that will be the day that we're truly free and we're truly equal, because we are different than men, and I think that that's okay. And one of the powers that we have is our sexuality, and I really think that's bullshit that Wonder Woman got thrown out of the UN because of the fact she's too provocative. That's, I think, to me, that's regressing. That's saying women can't be provocative, that we have to keep neutering ourselves and curling into ourselves and becoming something smaller and less than significant to make men and other women more comfortable. That's bullshit. Men don't do that. Like seriously, like think about, like, when was the last time you started work and there was a big burly guy when he became, like, made himself less small, like smaller and less intimidating to make us more comfortable. One of our powers is our sexuality. Why should we have to neuter ourselves to make other people more comfortable? I'm not saying we should sexually harass people, because that's different. That is, once again, the invasive ego, where we're invading someone else's space. That's different than just owning who you are. If you're sexually provocative, why can't you just be that way? It's distracting to men, and if someone wants to promote you for that, why does that matter? Why is that a bad thing? And why do other women care so much? You know what I mean? Like, it should be like, whatever way a woman makes it to the top, we should champion in that, and we should get behind her the way men get behind each other. And there should be a true sisterhood and solidarity. I used to say, I used to have the saying, because you know how there's bros before hoes. I used to say it should be sisters before misters, sisters before misters, and it's the same concept, you know. And I think another thing is that, like, the whole thing of girls calling each other sluts, like, that's very, like, why would you do that to another girl? You know what I mean? Like, I can understand if a girl is going in and she slept with your husband or did something like that, just like, you know, but that's the other thing that drives me crazy is, like, whenever, like, a girl finds out another girl, like, slept with, like, her husband or her boyfriend or whatever, do they go after the husband and get mad at the husband? No, they get mad at the girl. He's the one who made a commitment to you, not the girl. So why are you mad at her? Guys don't do that. They might beat the guy up, but it's like, it gets over with fast. Like, they might in a second if he's right there, but they really get mad at the girl. They'll dump her. Like, even like... when it comes to like, because I used to be really obsessed with, like, serial killers and, like, the ID channel and, like, watching all the stuff on there. And I think the pattern that I always noticed for girls, that if a guy cheated on a girl, she didn't go after the guy. She would go after the girl and she would hurt the girl. Where the more often not, the guy, if a girl cheated on the guy, he would, like, a lot of time he would kill the girl. He didn't, like, maybe he would beat the guy up or whatever, but he would just, like, oh, whatever, you know. But only if he came to the house. He didn't usually go after the guy. But he would kill his wife or his girlfriend or whatever type of relationship that they had. And this was always very interesting to me. And this goes to my whole theory of, like, guys are very territorial when it comes to girls, and I like or if they're homosexual, whatever it is that they're attracted to, they become very territorial of that. Girls are jealous, and it's different. And it goes into the whole comparison thing. It goes into the power dead even. They begin to, whether it becomes to vying for a man's attention or it becomes to getting a position at a company, when they don't get that, they begin to compare themselves to the other woman and say, what do I have that other person doesn't have? Instead of using that as inspiration to become something better and saying, she has, like, these things, I want to have those qualities, because I think that's what men use the Uberman for. They say, there's this Uberman, I want to be that, and it's, like, inspirational. I think it even goes that way in comic books. Like, it gets me angry that girls get mad that girls are sexy and strong and all these things in comic books, and they're like, it's a male fantasy. Yeah, it's their fantasy, but let's face it, girls, if girls like that existed in real life, guys get scared shitless of it. Like, when guys talk about, like, they'll talk about, like, I don't know, various types of athletic women, and they're always like Serena Williams. Like, I heard a comedian the other night. He was like, you know, I wouldn't want to have sex with that. She'd probably, you know, suck my dick up inside of me, her, and then spit it out. Like, they're scared of that shit. And, like, if a girl's like that, and it's the same thing when a girl's sexy and intelligent. Guys are intimidated by these types of things. They don't admit it, but they are. And I think a lot of times girls will even want to modify this to make men feel more comfortable. Not just make other women feel more comfortable, but make men feel more comfortable. And I say we have to stop doing this for any of that and just do it for yourself. Look at men the way men look at us. Men, a lot of times, no, I'm not saying this about all men, but there are a lot of men out there that just see women as objects and just sees them as a means to an end. I think that if more women stop seeing men as just a means for their identity. I think a lot of times girls do that. Like their father gives them their identity, then they get married and they take on the guy's name. And that's changing a little bit. A lot of girls get hyphenated names, but even that sometimes is a problem. Like I was talking to someone not that long ago, and I was like, I think that like it should change that, not just having hyphenated names, but I think that the girl, like when a girl gets married, right, she has her first name, her first last part of that hyphenated name should be her mom's last name, and the last name will be her husband's name. But before she gets married, it will be her the first part of the last name will be her father's name. So like say your parents' name is like your mom's name is Johnson and your father's name is Smith. Like if you're a girl, your name would be Johnson Smith. If you're a boy, your name would be Smith Johnson. Then if you got married, if you're a girl, your name would be Johnson, and then you take your last name would be the first part of the man's name. So if a guy's name is like, I don't know, Rogers Peterson, and Rogers was his father's name, her name would be Johnson Robertson, and you know what I mean, and it would go back like that. So the girl's genealogy always goes through the girl, and the guys goes through the guys. Now, if it's same-sex marriage, it could still work similarly because there's usually always a more social or female type person in the relationship, and always the more male-based, and it would just switch. You just switch it back and forth depending, and it would still be, and you would have to decide, who's going to have which last name for the child, in that relationship. But I still think it could work that way. And I think in doing that, then you still have the genealogy that goes back through the parents, and it could follow in that way. But then the thing is that girls still have identity that's completely separate than a man's. And it's her own identity, and it goes through her mother's. And I think that would be very empowering to girls. And I don't even think they realize how empowering that would be. And I think also right now, like, we as women expect a lot of times men to overcome their biological imperatives. Like, not to look at other girls and not to fuck everything, even though I don't understand why that's wrong, but whatever. That's maybe a time for a different video. But there's the expectation there. But girls don't ever even try to overcome their biological imperatives, which is to be in a relationship a lot of times and to have babies. And if you even mention that to a girl, she's like, "That's my right," blah 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 blah. But let's break this part down a little bit. Men are visual creatures for the most part. And of course, like, it's always like a bell curve, but they've done studies, fMRI studies on the male brain and on the female brain when it comes to stimulation. There's a part of the brain that's called the preoptic medial area that's actually 2.5 times larger in men than it is in women, and it's it's due to visual stimulation. So men, you put them in a scanner and present them with a provocative image, depending on what it is that they find provocative. Bam, that part of the brain lights up, and that thing down there gets hard, right? It's not the same for women. For the most part, of course, like everything is on the bell curve. There are some women that are exceptions to this, just like there are men exception to the whole visual stimulation rule. And so, like, I think that men are very much motivated by this, where women the other way, it's the other way around. Like, because we're not visually stimulated, however, we do produce a lot of oxytocin after sex, and that's a bonding chemical that turns things around. So a lot of times guys before sex are a little delusional. Like, I'm sure girls all know that guy that, like, if a girl walks by and he, like, tries to hit on her, and he'll be like, "She wants me," and all the girls are like, "No, she doesn't." And you know that the guy's a little bit delusional when it comes to that. But girls are the other way around. A lot of times the girls will have sex with a guy, and the guy's like, "I just want to be friends." And the girl's like, "He really likes me." And she'll read all kinds of things into it that aren't really there. And I think that these are biological imperatives. These are hormones that go through your body. And when you understand them, and you can transcend them, And I think that a lot of us girls that are on the spectrum, especially us very hypersexual girls, we have grown up since a very young age seeing men the way men see us. Like, I know for me, I started masturbating when I was 10. I just got my period. I didn't know what was happening. I didn't even relate it to boys or girls at first. Like, I had these wet dreams about being devoured by, like, spiders and snakes and various. I would wake up and I would be all wet down there, and but I'd be all achy, and I don't even know how I figured this out, but I got a long-handled wooden brush, and I would insert it inside myself, and after a few thrusts, I would feel this crazy pumping and this wetness, just like, yes, I'm a squirter. And that is a thing. That does happen with women who are built more like me, I guess, or I'm sure there are neurosocial girls that are like that as well. If you're hypersexual, I think that coming is much easier, and sex becomes very much like that. It becomes a hunger to want this to happen, and you know, I found that out, and at first I didn't even associate it with boys at all, or girls, because, like, you know, like in a separate video or something, but I realized that I did have these urges, and so I kind of looked at guys very differently than other girls. I didn't, and actually, for me, I actually found as I went along that the people that I cared about the most were the people that I least wanted to have sex with. In fact, usually the people that I wanted to have sex with were the people that I didn't really like that much, and I did just kind of see them as objects. And I think that if more girls like looked at guys that way, then their opinion wouldn't matter as much, because they wouldn't mean as much. They wouldn't be about identity and about being in a relationship and about having babies. It would be less about all those things. And I know a lot of people will probably be up in arms about this, and I'm sorry. I just, I think that like, as girls, like, we have to start looking at things a little bit differently. We have to stop pulling each other down. We need to, whatever way a girl wants to be, if she wants to be a prostitute, then all the power to her. If that's something that she wants, I'm not saying that girls should be put in sex slaves, but if that's something that she chooses and she wants to do, then why are you condemning her for it? You know what I mean? I think those are the things. I don't think it's this, you know, I think guys maybe probably tease a guy who does something like that, or if he's like a male stripper or whatever. But I think at the same time, guys, they don't care if another guy is doing that. Like, it's not, they don't condemn each other for it. And I think they tease each other, and they but I don't think that's the same as being critical and judging somebody for their lifestyle choices or how they get ahead. And this goes into, like I said, like, Neighsayer and I have been kind of going back and forth with these comments, and we were talking about the neurosocial. Like I was saying, I think that the social brain is just the more female brain is actually more social, and the more social brain, I think the ego is much more external, and not only so they care so much more what everybody's thinking, and it's so much more susceptible to social influence. And I think that can be overcome, but that needs to be acknowledged first. That you know, because I think that those of us on the spectrum, we're much more manipulated individually. Don't get me wrong, because when I was a little kid, I got taken advantage of, especially for men, because I didn't understand. It was almost like sometimes when I was extra hungry, I was like a cat in heat, and I swear to God, guys can like smell that on you, and they do, and I think that they sensed my vulnerability, and that I was very naive, and I got taken advantage of quite a bit, and it took me a while to figure it out that there's like a game. There definitely is a game that the neurosocial men like to play, and you know, like I said, I'll get into that into another video, but you know, so individually, I'm very easily manipulated, and that's difficult. I think as I've gotten older, I've gotten better at detecting that, and I'm not good at manipulating others at all. But socially, I don't think that those of us on the spectrum are influenced or manipulated easily at all. Like, we're not susceptible to any of that stuff. So, or as susceptible. I think that we can be in certain situations and everything like that. But I think on the most part, like, all my life, you know, whenever I even try to identify with a group, and I want to get into another video about that, about group identity and things of that nature. I was always told that I straddled some line. I was like a poser or whatever, because I wouldn't do all the things that I needed to do, like whether it even being going to a convention. Like, if I went to a Star Trek convention, I was told like because I didn't look the part or whatever. Sometimes people would get mad at me, and they would actually test me on my knowledge. And you know, and then when they realized, like, I would talk to them about Star Trek, the original Star Trek, and all the timelines and the discrepancies in the timelines from over to the next generation, like even from the Klingons and how they changed and the evolution of it, and how, like, the rationalization, like, I would get into all of it, and you know, they were always like, and I think that's more important, is your knowledge base. And like, if you're really excited about something and you love something, that doesn't mean you have to completely adhere to all, like, and that's the whole group identity thing. And I think that a lot of times the social brain is much more susceptible to that and feeling they have to identify with the group fully than those of us that are on the spectrum. Hopefully I didn't offend anybody too much. And I just, like I said, just think of, before getting upset about what I've said, just kind of just like think about it and consider it, because I think that this is the crux of the problems for females in general when it comes to equality, that we have to stop pulling each other down. That I think that we are our own worst enemy, and that we've kind of enslaved ourselves, tethered ourselves to these limitations and these expectations of each other that are silly, and they shouldn't even be there. All right, thank you everybody, and have a good day. Bye.